In this chapter, we're going to become familiar with how we can use other AI and generative AI technology within Adobe apps for our Premiere Pro workflow. First off on our tour is some of the generative AI image options inside of Adobe Photoshop that's helpful for both still and video workflows. If you're following along with the exercise files, just double-click to open that up. And in the media folder happens to be an in-paint and out-painting Photoshop folder. We want to select the image that has the digit 735 at the end, and you're just going to open that inside of the most recent version of Adobe Photoshop. Now, the folder was called in-painting and out-painting for a reason. These are two common terms used in AI for being able to manipulate an image and generating new additional content. So in-painting means changing something in the middle of the image, while outpainting means extending an image. What we'd like to do is take this volcano image and outpaint or extend it inside of Photoshop. A way that we can easily do this is with the crop tool. I'm going to select this, and we're going to make an ultra wide panorama. In fact, here where it says ratio at the top, I made this very narrow view called 19 by 6. So I don't want to lose as much of my image, so I'm going to extend this even further. And notice that the new content that it's going to create is going to be over here on the left-hand side. And in our contextual taskbar, we have the option, because the crop tool is selected, to create a generative expand. And once we click on that, we do have the option for typing in a text prompt, or even if we don't, we can allow Adobe Photoshop to look at the contents of the image and decide in how to fill it. Let's choose Generate. Adobe Photoshop gets to work. And if you take a look at the Layers panel as it's generating new content, using an Adobe Firefly model, we'll see here in a second that we'll have 3 options to choose from with how it extended it. So here we can see the continued volcano path, which I filmed in Iceland. So that's variation 1. This is variation 2, and this is variation 3. Now, in the case that you don't like any of these, keep in mind, we can generate again, or we can also add a prompt. I want to just type in volcano path, bright orange, and now choose to generate additional variations. So each time Generative Extend gets to work, it's going to create 3 variations for you. So again, here directly on the contextual taskbar, I can move between each of these images to try to figure out what I like. I kind of like this volcano splash. And notice with the layer selected, the generative expand layer, just above it in the properties panel, are visuals of each of these variations. In the case that you don't like any of them, you can delete that from the list so that you're left with just the variations that you do like, seeing in the contextual taskbar that this does update. Now that we've become familiar with an outpainting workflow, let's open up another still that we saw. I'll go back to my exercise files and just go to the abandoned airplane just above it, and I'll load that into Photoshop. Let's move from the crop tool over to the move tool. And we have a few options from the contextual taskbar right away. One is that we could try to select a subject if it sees it in the frame. However, in this case, it sees both the plane and my subject. So I'm going to just deselect that. In addition, we could try to make a selection of the subject here using another tool that picks up on objects called the object selection tool. That's 4th in the list here. And I'm just going to click on the subject to see that it does see him. Now, before I do, if I would like to make sure that he is removed altogether, I can make some changes to this mask. And one of those options is to click on the paintbrush and choose expand selection, which I'll do by a few pixels. And that just expands outward what is currently chosen. And here I'm just going to choose generate fill. I can type in the word remove, or I can click on generate just to see what it will do in this specific shot, seeing if it might pick up on the fact that I do want to remove the subject, so I see the airplane by itself. Similar to generative extend, we can see that we now have 3 options and the person has disappeared. And easily we were able to remove that subject. In addition, we can use this in-painting technique to add to our frame. In fact, I'm going to select the rectangle marquee tool, and in this case, just select the upper portion of the image. I'm going to click on generative fill and just type in blue sky. I don't have the entire sky selected in this case, but I'm going to choose generate. We get a new generative layer here within the layers panel, just above our current generative fill, which has removed our subject. And we can see here 3 variations within the properties tab. So here's one with a much bluer sky there at the top, one that is a little bit more blue, and one that didn't pick up on it at all. So I'll just remove that by clicking on the trash icon. But just look how easy it is to manipulate those existing photos. And as you can see, something like generative extend could be used in video workflows where you have certain portrait shots that you might want to have framed for a 16:9 aspect ratio. Another thing to keep in mind is how we might be able to extend video from a vertical source to something more horizontal that we would show on YouTube. If you don't have a lot of movement on the outside of your frames of a vertical or a square aspect ratio source that you want to show in a 16:9 sequence, we could take a still reference, bring that over to Photoshop and extend it using these tools, and then bring in that new still inside of Premiere Pro where it will just look like it was shot on HD. I show this example in my AI and generative AI for video content creation course that you can check out here on LinkedIn Learning.